Hello everyone, welcome to our channel. So for today's episode, we have a special guest, a couple, Kevin and Sui.
I'm Kevin Brandstetter. I'm from the United States. I grew up in a town called St. Louis. I moved to Korea in about 2015 and got married to a Korean woman who's here.
My name is Sui Kim. I am wife to this Mr. Brandstetter. Originally from Korea, almost born and raised. And then when we met, we were in Korea, but then now we're here in San Jose.
So we for this episode, we mainly want to know their stories. So from the very beginning, how did you guys meet and how did the story start?
So I moved to Korea in 2015 to help my friend. We met through her sister at church, and at first I think we didn't really hit it off well. She didn't like me at first. I was kind of a very loud and confident person, which she thought was kind of didn't like.
Arrogant.
Didn't like. But her sister, and so she was like, "Hey, this guy's a good guy. Maybe you should give him a second chance." And so Sui was willing to kind of be my friend. And over time, I decided I wanted to pursue her as a wife, and so I told her that I thought she was wonderful, and asked her to be my girlfriend, and she said maybe. And then no, she said yes. But yeah, that was kind of how we met.
I'm a kind of a person who, once I have like a negative, first impression, I'm like, I don't give them a second chance. And I came, the church was fine, but like the minister, he wasn't the main head pastor. The English ministry had a head pastor, and then it's fine, but the minister, the young minister, I don't think we were gonna hit it off. As we got to know each other in the small group, I was like, oh, actually, he is a good human being, right? Mm-hmm. And then a good God-loving Christian. So we were friends, and then suddenly I was like, oh, hey, why don't we make it a little different than just friends? So I was like, oh, I was a little surprised, but
yeah, that was awesome.
But I was like, okay, we prayed about it, talked to my family about it, and then I said, yeah, let's give it a try. So that's how we got started.
America's generally an individualistic culture, right? So people are kind of judged as an individual.
Yeah.
And then Korea is more of a collectivist culture, right? Your status in society matters, and within your family, these types of things.
Yeah.
So when you communicate in a collectivist situation like Korea, or like Sui's upbringing, you have to care a lot more about the things you say, right? Because it doesn't just reflect on yourself, it reflects on your family.
Yeah, exactly.
It could get you fired, these types of things. That was one of the challenges I ran into in Korea, kind of dealing with another culture. So I was while working there, oftentimes we would have work meetings, right? And I would just share my opinion, if the manager's like, hey, this is the plan we have for the teaching stuff. And I'd be like, well, I think that's not going to work, I think, and then they don't tell you to your face that they didn't like that, right? But then later on you get a letter or something and they're like, hey, the manager didn't like when you did that, don't do that. And it's like, when I was young, my mom always told people that if I was alone, I would just talk to trees, right? Even for Americans, I'm a little bold, but which is not always a good thing. So it's not a brag. It's just part of my personality. Sui, I think, does fall into kind of a little bit more of the Korean mindset of kind of don't cause trouble, don't make waves, you don't need to make waves, type of mindset.
I don't think I'm better and he's worse, but
which I think we kind of even each other out.
Yeah.
Sui's kind of like, hey, you calm down a little bit, and then I'm like, hey, you need to speak up a little bit more. When I was dating in that era of my life, I was dating girls, and usually with my confidence, I could kind of
get a date.
Yeah, I could easily, get someone interested in me. I felt that way, right? Which is a little arrogant. I apologize. And then when I met Sui, she kind of deflected that personality that I have, right? Where she was disinterested in it, right? And it was in that first kind of few weeks of knowing her, I realized that is a very valuable trait that I wanted in my life, right? I didn't want someone who just who told me yes all the time, or did whatever I wanted to do, or made me feel better about my ego, right? I wanted someone who would challenge me to grow as a person. And when I first shook her hand, she like collapsed my fingers. It was like, I was like, oh, okay, she's a real strong person.
No, I think
she just like she works in the business world, so that first handshake is important, you know.
Got it.
So when I first met him, he was already kind of established. He had like close friends group, whereas I was like a newbie, you know, just walking into the church. And then he seemed like super popular, kind of loud, confident, like hello. Nice to meet you, you know, and like very kind, but nothing personal, you know. It's not a personal level of closeness. So, you know, so I was like, oh, okay, he's just, you know, being a pastor, confident, but doesn't really care. He has this like close kind of clique, you know, which I didn't like. So that was my first impression. I thought the pastor or minister in a church should be like super welcoming, like, oh, hello, how are you? Oh, what do you need? You know what I mean? So that's just my impression of what the pastor should like, my preconceived idea, you know, or expectation. As I got to know him personally in the group setting where we were sharing the Bible and then like the different topics that we discussed in the small group, like, oh, he actually changed my views. So, and then also he has his own like struggles and brokenness. And I was like, oh, he's just another broken person. He looks confident, but that's not all that he is. He has like struggles and brokenness and struggle that he wants to overcome through faith. And and he is actually a really, really kind soul. He is actually really, really kind. Almost like he just let people take advantage of him, like, you know, but not because he's naive, but because he has a kind soul. He sees the goodness in another human being. So in that sense, we're so different. And that was like so kind of comforting, because my dad was kind of like that.
At a young age, I lost my dad at 10. You look 21, I think.
Yeah, 21 or 22.
21, 22. When you go through that, it just destroys your view of the world. Like when you lose a parent, it kind of, the way, it's weird because you don't understand how much of the world you see through the lens of mom and dad until they're gone. And then you're like, the world's a different place. It doesn't feel the same. And so losing them early, you know, I basically felt like as a child, I already had the soul of an old person, you know, so I grew up feeling done with life, you know. And then I think from your 20s, you've kind of felt the same, you know, and so we were both these weary, broken people, you know, coping and emotionally trying to survive the loss of our parents. And then God brings us together in a way that we can't really explain, and it's been amazing. Yeah.
So I didn't grieve. I mean, I did grieve, but it was postponed grieving. So I just kept myself really busy afterward, from 8:30 to sometimes like 1 to 2 a.m. and just made work was like kind of my life. And then after 6 years, I quit my job and I went to Canada. So that was the first time I actually tried to deal with my dad's death and everything. And then the nature. I lived in Whistler, British Columbia, and the scenery is just amazing. So I just really felt like this is like, it's like God's kingdom, and like, you know, the heavens are calling out glory of God. It's just so amazing, so beautiful. And then just like riding on the bus, I would just listen to worship music and just look out the window, and I would just think about God and like, why is he dead? Like, why did God not answer my prayer? Why is life so painful? Like, why? All these questions. And then I was just like, you know, my tears would like run in, like, you know, you look like this like dramatic like movie scene where like this girl like looking out the window, tears rolling down her cheek. So it was kind of like that. But I did a lot of thinking. I got to spend a lot more time reading Bible, praying about it. So I just had to face it, you know. So I did a lot of grieving during that time. So when I came back, I thought, okay, I think I dealt with it, you know, a lot, right? And then when I met Kevin, as we were sharing our childhood stories, like I was like pouring out, you know, I was just like crying so much. And then I realized actually I haven't dealt with it completely. And then because I'm meeting this person who actually understands, like that brought out even more emotions. And yeah, so I think I like cried for like months and months when we first started dating. We would just like talk, and then suddenly like, but then my dad is black, and then like I would just cry. And so just like having someone, and then like I don't talk about this with my mom or sister, because like my mom and my sister are the only one who share the same experience, but they're also really broken and struggling. I don't want to bring it up and say like how hard it is, because it's equally or even more harder for my mom especially, right? So you don't really have anyone to talk to essentially, and then right now you actually have someone who actually understands, who loves you, who actually understands, and then when he actually comforts you, it's coming from a person who actually understands. And then, because I think when I was grieving, I actually refused to kind of be comforted in a way, because I felt like, oh, I understand, like, and then in my mind I'm like, no, you don't understand, you know. So I was kind of having that emotions in my mind, so I was kind of closed. But when we shared, it felt like, yes, you do understand. And it's just like, you know, I thought most of the baggage had come out, but it was still a lot more was still in there. And then it was just really healing.
For a long time, I was kind of ignoring our shared trauma, right? Both of us lost our fathers. They were both pastors. We both grew up as pastors' kids. And I think God used that to kind of bring these two broken people together, like kind of like puzzle pieces. And we kind of connected in a way that I'd never connected with anyone, right? And that was another part of it. Was at first, what I initially liked about her was that she was very strong and she was able to stand up to me. But then over time, I realized she understood me in a way that no one else understood me, right?
And then I think another part is, so the shared experience is one part, but then I think he has a lot of character that my dad had too. So my dad was like a really, really loving person, and Kevin is also a really loving person, and being in a person and being loved by a man who really loves me, that is kind of similar to my dad. I don't want Kevin to be my dad, obviously, right? But that's creepy. But you get the point. Like, so the love that I have is very different than my previous other relationships that I had. It was more like, I feel like the way he loved me was like what I really needed, I think. So his personality, and then his personality, character, and then the way he loves other people, loves me, that itself was extremely just healing for me. So I always tell him I would always marry you. Even in another parallel universe.
Even if BTS asked you?
No, I don't care for BTS. But
until I met Suyi, I only ever grieved my father alone. Sometimes grief, you're listening to a song on the radio, and then all of a sudden a song that your dad used to sing comes on, and then you're just like devastated, you know, you're just crying outside the window. Like when your parent dies, you're like deconstructed, just like a pile of Legos on the ground, right? I think what we experienced was, in a lot of ways, a reconstructing of that emotion of being able to receive love and all that. And I think what helped me was being able to cry together. With Suyi will cry with me, you know. Sometimes she starts crying about her dad and I'm crying about my dad, and we're both crying together. And I've never met her dad. And then when we went to his grave, I was crying, you know, for her dad, because I understood it. I understood what she went through. And so I think that was part of it, was just having someone who can cry with you, because so many times we try to, we think fixing it is ignoring it. We think ignoring the struggle that we're having, or the brokenness that we have, we think ignoring it is healing, and that's not true. That's not the healing, right? I think she started sharing that, and so I understood that she's also willing to be vulnerable with me in a deeply vulnerable way, which I think is when she first asked me to go to her dad's grave with her, and so we drove out there together. It was like an hour trip or so away from Daejeon, which is where we were living, and I think that was where we both kind of wept together for what had happened to her, and I think from then on I felt more comfortable sharing. Yeah.
My dad's death is was a much bigger part of me, who I am and the way I am, and the way it affected my day-to-day living and my faith and my perspective of the world and of my faith. So it affected like every single aspect of my life, and I eagerly wanted him to kind of accept that as part of me, you know. And then that's one of the reasons why, because I think if I say, hey, do you want to visit my dad's grave, and he was like, oh no, and then I think that would have been like a
deal breaker.
Yeah, almost,
Yeah.
right? Because it's like such a big part of me. But then he was like, yeah, I do want to go, and then we went, and I think he was like, okay, you accept me fully, like, you know, 120% of me, right?
Because it's actually, I can imagine for a person who hasn't lost their father, it would be a really uncomfortable situation to kind of comfort someone that you're, you know, starting a relationship with while they're, you know, crying at their father's grave, you know, like who feels like normal in a situation like that, you know? So I think it takes being there and experiencing that yourself to really be able to connect on that level. I hated when older people, wiser people would tell me, wait on the Lord and follow the Lord and he will lead you to the person that you need to be with. I resented that. I hated it. And I fought against it. And in my life, I was a Christian when I became a Christian, but in my romantic life, I just pushed against this idea because I didn't believe it. And then I kept pushing and trying to date, and it actually left me more and more broken, more and more sad, more and more rejected, because you try to make these relationships, you go to a relationship and then they don't understand you, they don't care about you, they care about themselves more, and then you just do that 10 times, and by the end of it, you're just so jaded and angry, and you hate the other gender, and you know, and they, you know, like this happens to men and women, you know, and it leaves you kind of broken. It's because you're looking for the wrong things, right? And it was kind of when I let go of that stuff that I was able to clearly see how Suyi in my life, right? Because I had already known her at that point, and I kind of came to this moment where I was talking to my brother about it, and I was like, hey, you know, what do I do? I don't know what to do. And he's just like, you know what, just shut up and go for it. Go for her and stop being a baby, you know? And so I did it, and it all worked out. And it was one of those things where it didn't make sense on paper. You know, a lot of times in relationships, you try to make things make sense on paper. You're like, okay, we'll work together. You know, well, her behavior and my behavior, it makes perfect sense, and all this stuff. And then you kind of ultimately find out it doesn't make sense, right? And then with Suyi, it was kind of the opposite. At first, I was kind of like, I felt like her and I's personalities clashed. But then as we got to know each other more, I realized that was like a superficial clash. And then we actually deeply connected. But I never would have found that if I had followed my initial gut, which is like, oh, she doesn't make me feel good, so I'm going to keep going for the next person, right? So this is kind of a long answer, but what I want to say to anyone who's in a situation where they're either seeking a relationship like this or they're in a relationship, really, really evaluate the relationship to see if this person actually deeply cares for you and if you really deeply care for them. If you're in the relationship to make yourself feel better, you're going to end up broken and sad. If you're in the relationship to make yourself to fill some kind of emptiness, right, you're going to be broken at the end, because no one can ever fill that void. Only God can do that, right? And he will bring you to the person that will love you the way that he loves you, right? And I hated that answer, but it was true. And a lot of times the truth, we don't like the truth, right?
God will give you the right person at the right time. It's not your time. God will send you the right person at the right time. You don't know when the right time is. You just wait on Lord.
Because God actually knows what you need.
Exactly.
And a lot of times you don't know that, right? I didn't know I needed what she was going to provide to my life, right? I didn't know I needed another person who had lost their father, right? And who was going through the same pain I was going through. I didn't know that, right? And all the things I thought I needed, I was wrong. I was wrong every time. And I would go for the person who had the things that I thought I needed, and it blew up in my face every single time. And I didn't find her by my own skills. And I think for a lot of people, that's when they're seeking the Lord, that's what happens.
Cool. Yeah. It's a beautiful story I heard. I hope like you also find this story very inspiring and comforting in a way, and there's a cat.
So
if you, so if you wanna like listen to stories like this for more, please subscribe our channels and like this video, and then we have more to share with you. Bye.
Bye bye.